Welcome to the Home Business Podcast with Richard Captain Henderson, publisher of Home Business Magazine, and Sherilyn Colleen, managing editor. This how-to show helps you successfully operate your home-based business.
Greetings and welcome to the Home Business Podcast. I'm Richard Captain Henderson, your skipper at Home Business TV. Let's gear for sea and get underway. The number of customers who would rather talk to a bot or do a Google search rather than talk to an actual seller has more than doubled in the past 3 years. That explains why, even with all the advances in sales enablement tools, the number of sellers hitting their quotas continues to decline. Traditional approaches to selling are backfiring and on the growing number of unreceptive decision makers. Today's guest, Tom Stanfield, has a surprisingly simple solution. Shift the focus from crafting the perfect message to crafting receptivity. Tom Stanfield is CEO of Aslan Training and author of Unreceptive, a better way to sell, lead, and influence. He's shifting the entire art of selling to lasting relationships that can help set you up for long-term success. So greetings, Tom Stanfield. Welcome to the Home Business Podcast. Say hello to our audience.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, Richard. Really excited to be on your show.
Thank you. Where are you calling in from today?
Calling in from Atlanta, Georgia.
All right.
Atlanta, as they say. Yeah.
Cool. Hey, can we see a copy of that book?
Absolutely. I'd love to. Here you go. Hold it up.
All right.
You can see it. Yeah.
Perfect. Well,
finally,
thank you.
just came out about a week ago.
All right. You know, Atlanta's kind of a hub. It's an entrepreneurial.
Yeah, it is.
Plus, good writers community. I mean, it's a huge metropolis, and so we get a lot
of people have moved to Atlanta just because of the cost of living.
Mm-hmm.
The traffic is getting pretty bad. That's the knock on Atlanta's traffic, but the cost of living and just the diversity in business and people,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's attracted a lot of people. So they come down and visit it, then they don't want to leave.
It's like I guess a mini Hollywood or something.
Yeah, yeah, you got that. A lot of music. The music centers down here, Hollywood's down here. So, so I don't know what they call it in Atlanta. It's not Hollywood, but a lot of famous studios are down here. So yeah, it's exciting.
Great place to be. Tom, let's get to know you better. What made you want to tackle writing this book, Unreceptive, a better way to sell, lead, and influence?
It really came out of a passion and need. Passion because how we communicate ultimately determines the health of our relationships. Kind of communication makes relationships work, and nothing's more important to us than our relationships. We're never happier than our relationship. It also comes from a need, because I've been in sales training since 1995 is when we started Aslan. And as we've seen over the years, the customers becoming more and more and more unreceptive to talking to sellers. And so to the point where it's almost impossible for sellers to get their number, because the number of people that are unwilling to engage with a seller has declined so dramatically that they're running out of customers to talk to. And so the traditional approach to selling doesn't work on the unreceptive customer. So I felt like the book really needed to be written, and it's also part of the industry that I'm in. And I've seen such impact on the people that we've worked with and how successful they are at winning over this population of customers.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, you just have hit the bullseye with. I mean, unreceptive and unresponsive. It's gone over like a decade, and what I see, one thing is that so much of the communication went to email, to the point that you can't get through on the phone, and so you're trying to email, but what good does that do? You don't get any kind of two-way feedback, but it's a crisis.
Well, and the amount, there's two things going on with the amount of information that's exploded over the last, couple of decades. So you're talking about email, just the amount of information we get. They say we get almost 10,000 messages a day. And then the availability of information makes the seller in the mind of the customer really unneeded. The value is diminished because, I can get it on, like you said, Google, or I can talk to a bot, or I don't have to talk to a seller. And then just people are more isolated. They only talk to, it's harder to get to them. So that's caused the reaction to the seller, the desire to work with the seller, to be negative and decline. So that's what this book is about. It's actually the great thing about the way the book unpacks how to create receptivity is it aligns with almost all of our value system. It's
Mhm.
how we all want to be sold to. It's what comes to us. It's something that we're going to be more comfortable with, especially if anybody's listening to this podcast and really doesn't like to think of themselves as a seller, and they kind of reject or resist that idea of
Right.
manipulation and the tactics and tricks of selling. They're going to love this book because it's about really how to serve the customer better and
Mhm.
change some of the things that we've been taught. And ultimately, it works. It gets
Well,
people
yeah, I
to
mean, I tell
engage.
anybody who's going into a home-based business, a small
Mhm.
business, you
Yeah,
have to look at yourself as a seller. We're all
yeah.
sellers, and
Everybody's selling.
we're all sinners, we're all sellers. You
Yeah.
cannot get away from it. And it's something
Uh,
I stress you got to work it in every day to not
yeah.
just put sales off to, well, I'll schedule my calls next Tuesday. It's just got to
Mhm.
be, part of the process. But your approach to unreceptive selling starts with addressing selling barriers, what you call selling
Mhm.
barriers, such as changing the perception of a seller. Tom, can you talk a little bit about the barriers?
Yes, the book is organized around the 5 core receptivity barriers. And the number one, which you just mentioned, is their perception of you, what they think about your motive, how they think you're going to approach them. So anytime, whether you're talking to a personal friend about politics, a kid about who they're dating or drinking, or any important conversation, their perception of you ultimately determines whether they're going to be receptive to the message. Are you trying to control me, change me? This is about your agenda? And then there's the other barriers, getting people, getting a meeting, like getting the open door, like you mentioned, email. Like, how do I get a meeting? How do I break through the clutter and all the noise, get their attention and get people to engage with me? And then how do I get people to tell me the unfiltered truth? When the receptivity is low, they
Mhm.
give you sort of facts and the basic information. They don't really open up and tell you the truth, which is critical because you can't influence without the truth. And then the fourth barrier is, how do you get people to actually change beliefs? How do you get them to think differently? And that's really what influence is changing
Mhm.
people's belief. Influence isn't about fulfillment. People need this, you give them this, and education. It's about changing people's belief. And then the last barrier, which is the one that we obviously all care about, is how do we get people to actually take action? They may believe they need to change, but how do we actually get them to do something about it? So those are the 5 big barriers, and the book is organized around each one of those. And it's written in a way so they can dive into where they want to based on the problem they're experiencing.
Now, the one I look at, and I think it may be
Mhm.
the toughest barrier, particularly for somebody that's running a smaller business, a
Yeah.
home-based business, is motivating that customer to take action, particularly when more often the sales environment is taking place in a virtual connection.
Yeah.
Any ideas about how to break through, overcome that barrier?
Yeah, I mean yes, the typical reason the customer doesn't take action is because they haven't understood and emotionally experienced the benefit. For people to take action, not only do they have to believe that they need to change, but they have to emotionally experience what change is like. I mean, an example I use in the book is, we all believe, or at least 90% of the people believe, they should save for retirement. Should you save money for retirement? 90% of people, I mean,
Yeah, how
probably
much do
100%
you
would.
have?
Yeah. I mean, but most people, a high percentage of people would
Right.
say yes, of course. But what's the percentage of people that actually save for retirement? Is 15%. So they believe it, but they don't act. So we've got to get people to emotionally experience what it's like to embrace our recommendation. And so there's a lot that we teach about that in the book. But let's just say they're there. Let's say, yeah, they believe it. The main barrier is we haven't designed a plan for what steps they need to take, and they need to be baby steps,
Mhm.
right? It's like, if I'm trying to sell you on moving to Atlanta, the next step isn't move. The next
Right.
step is, what baby step can I get you to take that's in your best interest, that helps you assess whether you should move to Atlanta or not, and then just design that step, and then and position that next step as a way of helping them achieve what they want. And so that's a long answer to a pretty complicated
I want
topic.
to pull
But
something out you said there,
yeah,
I'm grabbing onto it. Looks important to me. Is emotion,
yeah.
is tapping into emotion, and
Mm-hmm.
do you look at that as one of the more powerful ways to link to influence? Is you've got to trigger those emotions.
It's not only more powerful, it's required. And people make
Mhm.
emotional decisions and support them with intellectual alibis. So we'll buy the car we buy. It's an emotional decision. If
Right.
the car wasn't an emotional decision, we would all be driving the same car. We would all have a car. If this car lasts the longest, it's the most affordable, it's the most economical to drive, and it's the safest, and we would just all drive that car. But that's not what happens. The car represents who we think we are, and it's our brand. So we all make emotional decisions, even people that are making what they call financial.
It's probably even more important than price.
Price has nothing to do with price. It's about price is a value, and the value is determined by the emotions you experience when you buy something or you make a decision. So emotions are key. And I think a lot of times sellers think too much about the logical argument they're making and prove the payoff, which is important. You need to. In the book, we talk about the formula. Action equals belief plus care. ABC. Action equals belief. They got to believe it, and then they also have to care. And so that's where the real work is, when someone's getting closer to.
Well, I like what you say about baby steps. You've got to you got to figure out what the process is to get there in little steps.
Yes,
and then
break it down. And too many people that are selling, again, regardless of what you're selling, they haven't broken down the steps. There's I'll follow up. Or do you want to buy? Or I'll send you a proposal. But
send you a proposal.
Send me a proposal. Or people will say, I just listened to a call the other day, and people will say, okay, well, that sounds great. We'll talk to our people and we'll get back to you. And the salesperson said, great. No, we need to lead the process. If we've sold our solution, service, whatever we're selling, we've probably sold it hundreds of times. Well, the customer may have never bought it. They're not professional buyers. And so we need to design the steps that they need to go through to evaluate what we're selling. And then we need to be able to articulate each one of those steps. So if that process and steps have been defined, we should be passionate and confident about recommending those steps. So that's typically where the problem lies.
This kind of ties in another point you had, was after getting the sale, what you talk about servant selling. What are some of the ways to, serve the customer for better long-term results, which is what I kind of think you're getting at with the concept of servant selling.
Yeah. The servant selling is super easy. Most people want to focus on the behavior. What are the things that I need to do to build trust and be considered as servant selling? The most important thing you can do is make a decision, right? We talk about it in the book. I talk about this idea of a compass. A compass works because it knows where the North Pole is. There's a huge magnetic field on the North Pole. And so related to the North Pole, you always know where you are related to North. Well, our compass points to self. That's the great magnetic pull, is to self. So what we have to do to ultimately be a servant is two things. One, we have to believe it's in our best interest to serve. And that's really the truth. It is. If you focus on serving the customer, you're going to be more successful and you're going to be more fulfilled.
Oh, so this is also part of the sales process too, woven in the servant process.
Yeah, your process should be built around how to serve the customer and help them make a decision, not how you should sell, how you introduce yourself, how you position your email, why you ask the questions you ask, how you represent your solution. Everything is about helping the customer get what they want. And that's ultimately, we need to first decide that's in our best interest to do that. And then before every meeting, we need to make a decision, because if we don't stop, like if I don't stop before this meeting, Roger, if I don't say, hey, what is my focus on this call, then I'm going to represent me. It's going to be about me rather than about you.
I just want to stop you right there. Is there a natural tendency to do that if you're not thinking about it? You got to keep focused on the other person, and if you don't keep that in mind, you'll drift back subconsciously to being about you.
That's exactly right, Richard. If that's why I'm saying your compass defaults to self, and so you have to reset your compass every time you're in a meeting, every time before your meeting. You have to just constantly manage that. So yes, that's the key. And it sounds so easy and basic, but our gravitational pull to self is so strong that it's something we always have to manage. And there's nothing wrong with that. We need to be focused on self, but to be effective at influence, we have to make a decision and we have to decide who's first.
I like that. I just want to pull that out.
Yeah.
the magnetic field, it's lined up on you automatically, and you've got to figure out how to
You got
look
to
outside
stop
of
and
that.
make a decision. You've got to stop and make a decision. And if you do, it'll change. And most people overlook that, but because it seems so basic, but it's critical.
Well, the most critical element I would think of converting the unreceptive is not how well you articulate your point of view, but how well you validate theirs, which that kind of gets into getting into their magnetic field. Help us, if you could, just understand this a little bit better.
This comes from a model that we teach, that when you seek to influence somebody, there's always two polarized points of view. You see, think of it as you're on the North Pole and you see this way is up. Like if you look up, up is up. But if the other person is at the South Pole, their vantage point, they see up is completely opposite of you. So you have two polarized points of view. That's always what's happening when you step into the role of an influencer. You're trying to change their beliefs and see the world differently. So what most of us do is we prepare which is the traditional approach to selling, is we prepare our message. We go to court. We say, this is why you should think differently. This is why you should change political parties. This is why you should buy my solution. This is why you shouldn't do what you're doing. This is why you should go into recovery. Whatever that's our point of view. And so we think about that. We prepare our messages. We come up with our case studies, etc. Our example. The other person has a completely different point of view. If you want them to see your point of view, you need to set your point of view aside, your business case, your argument, and take the trip and articulate their point of view. And when you have that oh moment and you say, oh, that's why you see the world the way you do. That's why you believe what you believe. And then you articulate it back to them and they say exactly. That's when influence starts, is when you leave your point of view. You see their point of view, you understand it, you dive in, you respect them and believe that there's something that they see that you don't understand, and you feed it back to them. That has the greatest impact on influence.
I love your process here. To me, just looking at it from a layman inside, the toughest thing is, how do you read people? I mean, how do you read that person you're sitting across from, or in the Zoom call, or even just by, I guess you got to try to get out of email, but how do you actually read where they're coming from and ship and be able to get inside their head?
Yeah, well, that's a great point. I mean, for you to take the trip, it starts with an invitation. Influence always starts with an invitation until the person says, I want to know what you think about this subject. Whatever the subject is, you do not have the opportunity to influence. So if they're sitting there in a Zoom meeting and you can't read them, it's because you need to set it up by saying, this is about you. I don't know, which is another thing we teach in the book, as we call it, drop the rope. I don't know. Instead of the tug of war and trying to pull them to our position, I need to drop the rope and say things like, I don't know if our solution is right for you. My goal today is to understand what's important to you, what you want, what you need, the barriers to getting what you want or what you need, and learn more about that. And let's talk about you. And then we'll determine together if my solution can help. So they need to be talking. So you don't have to read them.
But there's nothing wrong with stating it up front that you need to gather information. You're ignorant. You're there to help. Don't put that out on the table.
I'm here to help you solve my business. When I had my home business, I worked out of the basement. I remember selling to FedEx, my first big account. I'm in the basement, no windows. It was lonely. I just started Aslan. And I was trying to sell to FedEx and I couldn't read them. They were what I would call closed, emotionally closed, unreceptive. And the reason is because they already had a sales training program in place that was free. So I was working with one of the divisions and the corporate had provided training. And so they're kind of like, why do I need training? So they're just kind of sitting there going, you talk, tell us what you have. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to tell you what you have because I don't know.
You have your sales program and sales leadership, and you're trying to get them to see the value of that.
Exactly. I have a sales training company, sales. So yes. And I'm trying to sell my sales training to them. Thank you, Richard. And so I said, look, I don't know if what we offer helps. And he said, well, actually, I don't think it will. He goes, because I have training free I get free training from corporate. So why would I need your program? And I said, I don't know. You may not. And so I said, if your program specifically is built for your inside sales group and it addresses the 18 unique challenges of selling over the phone, which is what your reps do, then you don't need my program. But if your reps do struggle with that, I'd love to talk with you about it. So let's talk about your organization, how you sell, what you need, and then together we'll figure out if our program could be a fit. Well, that led to a long conversation and ultimately a project, and we became.
It's like you're trying to set yourself up initially as a consultant.
You are a consultant. It's not you're trying to set yourself up for a consultant. You better be a consultant. That's what you are. Yeah. Customers don't need you to deliver information. They can get that on the web. You need to help them think about a better way to solve their problem. If you can't add value to their decision-making process, they're going to just Google, which is, by the way, why they don't want to talk to sellers, because they think they don't have any information. So the first place to start is actually have the information, actually be a consultant.
So yeah, selling is consulting. And I kind of like one of your approaches, which ties into kind of a tactic is, develop walkaway power. In other words, by saying you're willing to step back and realize it's not a good fit for them, that can actually work to your advantage because they show that you have walkaway power.
Exactly.
If it's not working out.
Well, the thing to remember when we talk about the walkaway is remember we really hadn't unpacked this yet, but the truth that we need to be aware of is when someone's emotionally unreceptive, whether the door is closed or the subject is closed, because sometimes they're unreceptive. They're not unreceptive to meeting with you. They're unreceptive to a certain subject, a certain product, they're not rejecting a solution. They're rejecting a sales call. And so what they feel, like we talked about, is they feel this tug of war. They feel like you're going to try to force them. There's going to be pressure, and they don't like that. So they're going to try to avoid a sales call. And so when you walk away, or what we call drop the rope, they go, oh, well, maybe this isn't a sales call. Maybe this is going to be helpful. Maybe this is going to be different. And they move towards you. And then you have an opportunity to sell once they're receptive. And kind of the organizing analogy for the book is that, there's two sides to farming. There's the fertility of the soil and there's the quality of the seed. If the soil's not fertile, the seed doesn't matter. So what does a farmer do? The first thing they do is they create a fertile soil, then they plant the seed. In selling, we're one-dimensional. We have a seed mentality. We're like, here's our message. I hope I can deliver it. And the reality is we got to first create a fertile soil. And so by walking away and dropping the rope, it creates a fertile soil. And then they go, well, tell me more about this. And I was in Best Buy. I walked into Best Buy a couple of years ago, and I was looking for a television, and I did what we all do. The sales rep comes over and he says, can I help you? And I say, I'm just looking. Even though I have no idea what TV to buy, this guy works here, but I'm avoiding the seller because I don't want to be sold.
Gosh, I don't want this guy. Like, we got this on special, and then just wrestles you right there.
And he's going to have some spiff that he's trying to, if he sells this TV, he gets a bonus from the manufacturer, and I know how that works. And blah, blah. And so here's what he said. He goes, hey, sir, I just want you to know I'm not on commission. So if you need help, I'll be over there. And he walked away. And I said, wait, stop.
You're hired.
Wait, yeah, come here. And so I said, tell me. Then I started peppering him with questions. Now, I'm not saying we need to say we're not on commission, but the message he was delivering was, I'm not going to pressure you. I'm not going to sell you. I'm here to serve you and be that consultant. That's the message we need to always deliver. And I'm not saying leave the conversation. You drop the rope, but you stay. So that's why we like the term drop the rope versus walk away.
I think it makes people less defensive. It kind of takes down the barriers when they realize you'll just walk away if they don't need you.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Long term after getting the sale, what are some of the ways that we can keep selling barriers and sales barriers from creeping back into that relationship with the client that you've now cultured and nurtured with the soil, and they're on board? How do you keep those sales barriers from creeping back in?
Well, I think that's a really good point you're making. Even though you may have a receptive customer or decision maker, regardless of where you are in the process, you can always lose it. in an instant, you can say something or try to manipulate them or try to, yourself could come back into play because you need a sale or you need to grow an account or you need to do something or you're out of money or whatever reason. And you can try to, manipulate, because that's what you really are. When you're trying to get somebody to do something for you, you're manipulating them for money. And so that, and it's not, again, we all are tempted to do that. I'm constantly tempted. I have done that. I've all of a sudden tried to win a deal and not really cared about the customer. So I think we have to constantly remind ourselves, what is my motive, and realize that I need to continue to maintain receptivity throughout the process and after they're a customer. And I think the simple answer to what do I do post sale and continue to maintain the relationship or grow it is continue to study what the customer needs. This follow-up call that most sellers, how you doing?
I guess anything? Also try to get feedback on their satisfaction or
absolutely.
God, don't send them another. What do you, I'm drawing a mental blank. You constantly are getting these, these rating
surveys.
Yeah. Online.
Yeah, surveys, which is,
but something.
It's how improve. How can you, study and I would just say focus and study on how you can improve, helping them get what they want, helping them. I think most people they just follow up and say, hey, can I help you? You need anything? Let me know. And that's a service call. And it's a call.
I guess it gets back to asking real questions. Like it all started with when we were talking earlier, asking good questions, and those apply afterwards, after you've, delivered some value to them.
Exactly.
Do you have any other advice on maintaining, long-term leadership and influence, through the selling process and afterwards?
There's the last chapter of the book talks about receptivity as a way of life. And it talks about really the 4 verbs that drive people that are other-centered, that's really a concept that I promote in the book, of thinking of the world. Your focus and the way you live is about serving other people. Now, you don't serve everybody because you got to choose who you serve. And so there's 4 verbs that drive people that are other-centered. And other-centered people, again, are more successful, they're more influential, and they're more fulfilled, and they have better relationships. And I would just say is making that decision to live other-centered and studying the people that you want to sell to and serve, and the people in your life. It's so easy to, when you step into a social function, like I would just say, applying this to coming up in Thanksgiving. I don't know when this is going to air, but whether you've been through the holidays or you're about to go to the holidays, you think about how you operated at that function. Is it about you and why people aren't talking to you, or what you want to talk about? Or, are you a me monster, or are you there to serve people and get to know them and see how they're doing? And you'll see that you'll have a much better holiday if it's about others than it is about you. And people will be attracted to you.
People like to talk about themselves.
Exactly.
If you just ask the right questions and sit back.
People love
to
talk about themselves. Well, and the reason that we want to talk about ourselves is because we want attention. We all have the same emotional needs, but the best way to get our emotional needs met is to focus on meeting other people's emotional needs. And then they're going to be attracted to us and want to hang out with us. And so it's,
I look at this as almost like, one time I went to a seminar, they were talking about relaxation and a breathing technique, but it almost be, you had to constantly focus on that breathing technique, or you'd forget to breathe like that. Something that would go on all day. It's almost like, it's almost having that other focus. If you're not looking at that almost as breathing and reminding you how to do it right, you're going to shift back into me. And it's got to be something you embrace each day.
It's something I say all the time when I talk about these concepts. They're very intuitive. It's very easy to understand, but like breathing, but it takes constant reminders to continue to operate in an other-centered way. It's not difficult, but it just takes, it's like everything else in life. It requires discipline. And the goal of the book is to lay out what we need to do, and then hopefully people will embrace it to the level where they're going to make it part of their everyday life.
Well, Tom Stanfield, this has been a great discussion on getting more unreceptive in our selling. Do you have any final points you'd like to share?
No, I think this has been great. Great meeting you. Thanks for having me on the show. And I hope people will can use the book to have a more fulfilled and more fun and rewarding sales career.
Well, I like to pull out one nugget. I'm hoping everybody goes and gets the book and gets down this road, but at least embrace something great you said right there, which is nutrient. You can't just look at the seed. You got to look at the nutrient and how to plant things for future success. Well, thanks for joining us, Tom, today on the Home Business Podcast. Learn more about Tom Stanfield and his book, Unreceptive, A Better Way to Sell, Lead, and Influence. Please visit unreceptivebook.com or our podcast website for more information on guests. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Home Business Podcast. Share your feedback with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our website, homebusinessmag.com. Read the Home Business Startup Guide. Visit us at the expo at homebusinessexpo.com or the magazine, homebusinessmag.com. My favorite part here, I'm Richard Henderson saying, anchors away. We'll talk with you soon. Until then, make it a great home-based biz day.